everybody, welcome back to episode 5 of my series, What Were They Thinking?, where I try my best to take a deep dive into some of my favorite licks and riffs and get in the head of the composer and player and maybe kind of sort of what they possibly could have been thinking when they were creating these parts. Today you just heard me play one of my favorite licks, riffs, I don't know what you want to call it, licks I guess, melodies from the incomparable Paul Gilbert. Paul was such an influence on my playing growing up, first listening to the Racer X albums. But you know, I really started to enjoy what he was doing once he joined Mr. Big and really started focusing more on really melodic songwriting. And I think Green Tinted Sixties Mind is just a fabulous example of an incredibly well-written pop rock song with hooks all over the place. Beautiful vocal harmonies. Eric Martin nailed it on that. Billy Sheehan played incredible on it. And I think that was just a real high point for them. And I think it was a pretty successful hit for them as well. But this opening lick, I remember hearing it and going, wow, what is he doing? So let's figure out exactly what he was doing. As I always like to do, and I will have the tabs up on the screen, is I like to go over what kind of the harmonic structure that these licks or riffs were being played over top of or were implying, just so we have an idea of where these ideas come from. So on Green Tinted Sixties Mind, Paul starts that song with that famous riff. But then, after maybe a couple passes through it, Billy Sheehan's bass comes in, and Billy plays something like this. Before the whole band kicks in and Paul sort of joins in with a rhythm guitar part. So what is that? Well, if you look at the intervals that Billy's playing, he starts off by playing just a simple E and G sharp note together. So a major third off of an E root, kind of implying an E major chord. Now when he does his next chord, and the timing on this is kind of syncopated. It's on the upbeat, it's like 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. So the first chord is held for, or the first interval if we want to call it, it is implying a chord when mixed in with the melody. So the first chord is on the 1, it's going to be held for a beat and a half, and then on the and of beat 2, we're going to switch to our next chord. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and, before repeating that. So we have basically this little E major chord, or major third interval. Now all he does for the next chord to finish off that measure, coming in on the and of beat 2, or the up beat of beat 2, is he simply moves that third interval up to a fourth, which basically creates an interval of a perfect fourth, which almost kind of gives like a, I guess, an E sus4, although we don't have the 5 interval in there to perfectly create that chord. But so he basically goes from a major third to a fourth, still implying that kind of E bass note, which we kind of hear Billy play later. Then he moves up to a little inverted D power chord, or D5 chord. So we have the notes D and A. So that's the 1 and the 5, except he does the A as the bottom note and the D as the top note. But as we'll hear later, there's still kind of this E bass note pedal tone going, right? So that's kind of the sound we get before. Basically just moving up to an E5 chord after that, that's going to have the B and the E. Okay, so the whole thing would be like this if I put the bass notes in. So it's kind of like a D5 over E, and then an E5. E major, E sus4, D5 over E, E5. Okay? And now we'll see by understanding that exactly what Paul is doing with his lick. So if we think about it now, we're playing 16th notes for this lick. So it's basically 1 E and a 2, 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and, right? That sort of a thing. So we know that after 6 of these 16th notes, that first chord is going to change to that fourth interval, that perfect fourth interval based off of the E. Then after 10 more of those notes, we'll be at the next measure. So that'll be 16 16th notes in total. So if we look at those first 6 notes that he's going to play over this E major third interval, the notes are E and F sharp and B. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So all he has is E, F sharp, E, B, E, B. So lots of E's and B's with an F sharp thrown in. Now that F sharp is going to be the second interval, but because the bass underneath it at some point when it comes in is going to be playing that major third, we'll call it the ninth interval. So we kind of create an E major add 9 kind of a sound here when we combine it with this major third interval. Then you'll notice as soon as they do that perfect fourth interval, which the fourth interval is going to be the A, that next note right landing on that chord is where Paul plays this A note. Right there. Beautifully sets up that perfect fourth, and then 10 more notes hanging on to that chord. So now you'll notice A, E, back down to another A, B, okay? So all he does is messes around with the notes E, B, and A. That's it. Nothing more, nothing less, which kind of creates that E sus4 chord, right? That's exactly what that is. So even though Billy may only be playing on the bass this perfect fourth interval, the B note or the fifth interval is actually being played by Paul. So we start off on that first chord, E, F sharp, or the ninth interval, E, B, E and B, A, E, A, B, E, A, B, tap on an E, back to the B, back to the A, and back to the E. So we see how that works beautifully, outlining the harmony with what Billy's playing on the chord. So we end up with now a very solidified E major and E sus4 chord voicings when all the melody and what the bass guitar is playing underneath it. Really interesting. Now, a little word before we go on to the next measure about how to perform this. A lot of people look at this and think it's quite difficult. And if you kind of think of it the right way, it's not bad. There's lots of time buying opportunities to move around. When you see somebody play this, it looks like a lot of jumping around, but if you notice when we're doing these jumps, I start off with this hammer-on pull-off, E, F sharp, E. Then basically, once I pull that off, this hand is free. We've pulled off to the open, I'm hitting an open B, and then I have to be up here. I'm even hitting another open E after that. So lots of time to start shifting that hand while my pick is taking care of hitting these open notes. Right? Again, we pull off to an open E, which buys us time to get down to this lower A. So we can just work even on things like this. Working on the transitions, trying to get our hand in motion, always keeping it in motion. Right? And again, we have an open E, which allows us to move up into position. Right? After we do our tap, we have time to move our tapping hand up to the 17th fret where it's going to go next. So there's always this time to have the movement of the hand to get to its next position. Lots of time bought with open strings and kind of the opposite hand doing what it needs to do and allow this hand, whatever hand that needs to move, to get into place. So that gets us onto bar 2 here, which we're going to talk about in just a second. So far we have the E major, E sus4. Now we said that the next chord is going to basically be like a D5 or D power chord with sort of an E in the bass, which is being implied, right? Which Billy kind of plays more definitively later on, I believe. So we have this D5 chord. So the notes of that D5 chord are going to be D and A. And if you notice, right when it switches to that, where does Paul tap? Well, he taps up at the 17th fret on the first string, which is, guess what, an A note. So he's right on a chord tone. So coming out of this, we end on an A, we tap an octave higher at the A, and as we're tapping that, it buys us time to shift this hand up to the 10th fret where he pulls off to a D note. So already he's outlined the little power chord that he's playing. But then always keeping that E as part of things. There's such an E kind of pedal tone sound going on here. Right, so he still keeps that E tied in there. So he taps at the 17th fret A, pulls off to D, hammers on at E, taps again at the 17th fret. This time though, while we're doing that tap, we do our transition back to, guess what? An octave lower, A at the 5th fret. And then tap our B note in there. And that's where we now switch our tapping hand back to a G sharp note at the 16th fret on the first string. Now you might say, well, why that? That's a G sharp note. Well, guess what? When you take that E power chord with the notes E and B and add a G sharp to it, we've now created an E major chord. That's the major third of the E. So right when he switches there, he goes B, up to the G sharp note, pulls off to another G sharp note, an octave lower. Now what he's just outlined there, G sharp, B, G sharp, E. Just outlining a full E major chord. Back to an E, slides the tapped finger on the E up to another G sharp. So the whole thing is just outlining that major arpeggio or chord, right? So he slides that up to the 16th G sharp, back to the E, pulls off to the B, pulls off to the G sharp. And that's the entire phrase. Now, he does do that, I believe, 3 times into a 4th time, but the last time, instead of doing the slide up to the 16th fret, he just does this instead. So he gets to that tap note on the E, and instead of going back down to our G sharp, he just taps the 12th fret and does kind of a slow slide with our tapping hand all the way up. Something like that. So that's the whole lick with kind of what I think Paul was thinking when he was creating that. You know, we can watch him do a tap lick like that and go, what is he doing? Where did he get these ideas? But when you actually dive into it, he probably very likely had a chord progression in mind, as I showed, and then outlined that chord in this beautiful melodic two-handed melody. And I think that's why it was such a successful song and such a successful hook. What a way to start that song, to just have people hit over the head with this beautiful melodic, smooth legato phrasing before going into this amazing pop rock song. So that's what I kind of think Paul was thinking when he was playing this. So huge hats off to the boys in Mr. Big, Billy and Paul, for such an amazing musical idea. I really love that tune. I love that band. I love those guys as players. And I hope you guys enjoyed this kind of deep dive look into what I hope Paul was thinking when he was doing that. So thanks so much for hanging out with me. I'm really enjoying doing this series. Please let me know if you're enjoying it as well in the comments below. Please like the video, share it with anybody who you think would get some use out of watching it. Subscribe to the channel, hit the little bell notification to get notified for when I put new content out. Thank you guys so much again for tuning in. Ciao for now.